What you need?
I need Becky's phone number. Is her card right here?
I have her number on my phone if you need it. There, in red if you need it.
Oh, perfect. I'll just write it down.
I walked in here on my
One of the auditors will be here today. It's riveting.
Yeah, try not to close your eyes. Like,
Mark Morelli was making fun of me, and I'm like, I like it. He's like, well, you like it. Unplug this. Is it not plugged in?
Jenny, are your earrings leather?
They are.
I like those.
Thank you. I made them. The reason why I said that is because the only other person that appreciates my earrings is this gal right here. So I brought her a couple pair of homemade earrings. I tried some at the farmer's market. They weren't selling. I'm like, really? Someone likes my earrings. I will give them to you.
Oh, that's wild.
But thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm not sure we need it that loud.
Hey, I was just texting you.
Oh, I walked out without my phone, so.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I was just like, oh shoot, did I miss the instructions?
Nope, you're good. Did you see I just emailed you the slides?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. All right.
Learn how to swallow water one of these days.
You okay?
Yeah, something.
Okay.
all right, let's call this meeting to order. Tiff, please take the roll.
Councilman Harjo,
Present?
Councilwoman Workala,
Present?
Councilwoman Garvey,
Present.
Councilman Brennan,
Councilman Brennan is on his way back from a state of Idaho meeting. He'll be here later this evening, so he's absent.
Mayor Sykes.
Present, let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. We'll run into topic discussion regarding fiber optics, and Councilman Harjo, this is all your show.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for everybody carving a few minutes out of the day for this. The intent, much as last time, is to kind of give the staff and council some exposure to where fiber exists in the process of things, our process improvements, what we've achieved since the last time we met, and that kind of thing. So today we've got some good information about the progress of LID1 in Silverstone, the JIRA project tracking implementation, the LID1 ARPA funding and where that sits in comparison to previous, and leaving enough room for mayor, council, staff discussion on the end. So, similar to last time's, LID1, out of the 707 possible hookups, as of 3/1, we have 187 active accounts in the system that are currently being billed. 123 homes currently opted in and in process in Silverstone 1. I'll show some slides and we'll log into JIRA here in a few and kind of explain how we get to that number. And rather than it being static on a piece of paper now, we have a lot of maneuverability and reporting and at a glance view. So in Silverstone, Silverstone 1 subdivision, Lago, Panner, Portal, Shaft, Nugget, and Minor are in process. Lago, Panner, Portal, and Shaft, if I remember correctly, are the four that have been that have had street work, box and collar work, and potholing, and some dig to the home work. Still have pulling fiber and mapping and that kind of thing. And then project tracking, we had our kind of project kickoff meeting yesterday morning. Got a lot of info from the fiber team and from customer service and staff about what the actual needs are, so we can configure like a task tracking tool. So the LID and LID revenue expenditures sheet. This has been updated since last time. Alexa, who manages the burn down sheet from the original seed funds of 1.2 million. To date, we have $803,000 in change in expenditures, 396,000 and change of that seed fund allocated to LID1 remaining. That being said, again, I think we discussed this last time. A lot of the major purchase was front loaded. Per the BRE design, we had many thousands of feet of conduit and fiber and connections and VBGs and all of the consumable materials for the project. And we've got some methodology in process to not only track what is on hand at any given time, but some idea of the overage and things that we're going to have the possibility of trading oversized conduit for appropriate size conduit, in essentially like a one-to-one cost trade. So again, that funding is current from November of 21 up until earlier this month. 3/9/24 was the last major expenditure out of that is tracked on the sheet. Task management in Jira. This is the one that we were kind of working on yesterday. The process and the reasoning for this is like the ease of use, standardized and custom reporting, a lot of at a glance. I'll log in and show you what that looks like here in a moment, but it's not only a web-based application, but there's phone apps. So the guys in the field don't have to, Danny doesn't have to pull his laptop out of his truck and hook up somewhere to log in and deal with that. Kyle, Danny, Sebastian, they can go right into the app. They're already in the system, and they can manage the tasks from that. So it's just the ease of use side is considerably better than, having to track it in a Word document and, lose track of where individual tasks are moving. So this is awfully helpful. I'm going to step out of this for just a moment and pull up the Jira site. So last time I kind of showed what the practice sheet was, essentially, with like flubbed addresses and that kind of thing in there. This has kind of been my test bed and sandbox, honestly, trying to remember how to batch edit and bring in the addresses from the various points that the information was collected. Fiber team, TIF, Paula, building services have all been very helpful in getting me the raw data for what the physical addresses are, what's coming in new builds, historically what's happened since the ordinance was passed and enacted that requires the new builds to have conduit in place. So again, this was last go-arounds, like, here's an example of what it does, and then now we have a summary of this is specific to Silverstone 1 in LID1. I'll work over the coming week to not only get the rest of LID1 addresses in here, but to also then capture the new builds in residential and commercial. The importance of that, to have all of the LID and the working list of new builds in residential commercial, is really so you can see for workforce tracking, scheduling. They're all facets of this tool that perhaps we can implement at a later time. Like, I think it was kind of a big bite to get everybody to adopt it in the first place. We'll get through the surface level task tracking of, have we completed this facet of work for this address, kind of thing. So I worked with the fiber team and Megan, Paula and Tiff on gathering all that info. They've been very helpful. At a glance, when you first log in the summary page, this will show kind of a breakdown of what the percentage of the total work in LID1. We have all of the addresses for Silverstone here, so this is representative of just Silverstone 1 neighborhood. But of that, we have 41% in like the phase 3, which was identified, and I'll kind of step through what the phases are that the fiber team and Megan helped kind of iron out of like the logical buckets of work that would be representative of like Megan's work passing off to the fiber team, their logical phases of work in the field, and then back to billing. So at the moment, we have 6 or so streets, 6 streets represented here. 15% of those are in phase 2, drilling, boxing, collaring, pothole work. Phase 3, 41% of what is in Silverstone 1 is in phase 3 in the restoration of yard work, pulling cable, and that kind of thing. What that looks like on the board, representative of the here's how these guys are going to log in and just make this simple task tracking. All addresses were originally put in and would have appeared of the 135, if I remember correctly, or thereabouts. Addresses for Silverstone 1 would have existed in the beginning in the all addresses category, and then working with the fiber team to create like logical steps of here are the addresses that would be for new build residential commercial will exist in this first column after they come out of the all addresses. That info will be pulled from building services. Working on a little bit more of an automated measure for the future. For now, it's probably going to be manual, and it's probably going to be me, and then teaching the fiber team and CSR how to input this for those. So I'm perfectly willing to handhold that until we're like up and running, right? The opt-in state where someone has expressed interest, whether LID or new build, contract signed means that we've got them, we've got them committed. Say this is an example would be a new home that was just built. They've come in and applied for the utilities, have opted in at that time. That address would be entered and then slipped over to the opt-in or contract signed phase, and then that gives the fiber team, Kyle, Danny, and Sebastian, our city employees, the cue to go, okay, this is sitting here and work ready to do, and then they can prioritize with management on how to schedule those. Phase 1 in planning really falls to like the idea of planning how the implementation of coming streets are going to be. Once the contract has been signed and we realize that we're going from street A to street B, next week is going to be street C, we're going to shift over street C addresses into the planning phase. That way they know from here out it is field work over the next couple steps. So right now, again, like I mentioned, phase 2 and phase 3 are representative of where at least 4 streets in Silverstone 1 exist, and all of the addresses that have opted in for that. The addresses between addresses, I guess we could call it, so like 600 to 605, 625, and there's a few houses jump down the street to 665. Those, we don't lose track of those homes because we're tracking everything and then abstracting out what the opt-ins are. So say we get on that street and somebody on that street goes, well, my neighbor got it, I think I'm going to do it too. We have the ability, we don't have to go back and do any rework. All of those addresses still live in the system and then can just re-enter the process, to follow in. So in practical application for Kyle, Danny, and Sebastian, in monitoring this aspect of it, when they complete homes in phase 3, they'll slide these tiles over to phase 4. As simple as that. now lets them say, this is the phase of work that we're in on this. We're gonna splice and do the install at 600 Southwest Lago today, or whatever that duration is, days, what have you, hours. Once those are complete and the actual field work has been done, the install's been completed, the customer is hooked up, that tile will move over to the billing part where customer service, Megan, will pick that up and be able to continue what she needs to do, internal paperwork to make sure that that person's billed appropriately and so on. And then we made sure to capture some phases of work in here for after support. If there's instances where a customer is hooked up and is getting a connection issue or something that could be attributed to the third-party router that we don't supply, that they buy, or a sequence of lights on the VBG that would tell our guys, oh no, this is something on our side. Perhaps there's been damage somewhere to the system. Any kind of after support in that sense would be categorized here. So even if an address is in the done phase and we get the call to the front desk that says we're having an issue, can you send somebody out to deal with that, the after support column will allow for that rework in that sense, or at least to capture that and then prioritize it of, hey, Kyle or Danny or Sebastian call and say, what are the lights on the VBG doing? Have you noticed anything here? And to cut down on the time of telephone back and forth, to make it very visually supported and really create a record of where that issue. I use the term issue because in the software realm and in this, it's each one of these tiles would be considered an issue, so I have to break myself out of the cycle of using that. So just the task of going back to do the after support, you can move that out of the done column and then back in. So questions, concerns on that? I know we just kind of did that kickoff yesterday with the on the ground team, but when it comes to management of the team, when it comes to scheduling and that kind of thing, are there any topics of concern that could or should be addressed in a way that would affect this?
I think when I talked to Danny later in the afternoon, he loved it. He loved the after effect too, that if someone does call, and if he can't pick his phone up, if it does get wired here, then one of those three can look on this task and say, oh, we got to go run and do that. And then like they said, they really liked the programming aspect of it, to see something tangible.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, he liked it. But yeah, it was good.
I mean, and to show some of the advantage of a movable, workable, malleable system like that, the sheet that you see here was kind of how we were managing where the opt-ins were and that kind of stuff, and it's very, very rigid and is more akin to Post-it notes than it would be a workable system of tracking.
I think the best thing about it, Councilman, is you're right. If Danny's got a list, I might not have a list, or Paula or Tiff or Chris might not have a list, or Megan might not have. We don't know what was done, what's not done. At least now we can get on here and go, oh, okay, that one's done.
Static documents have the issue of, well, who has the latest version?
Right.
Did we instate a version control system on it so we know, is it a shared document on SharePoint or what have you? This is a very easy to adopt system for multiple levels of users, whether it's to give a glance, to track scheduling, for asset management of hey, we have 12 houses on this street to do. We can't use the bore rig for water and wastewater today, but we can in 1 or 2 days, or hey, we need to put those on pause because we have this emergency where Public Works needs to shift that machine over to doing a different function. There's a lot of different levels of use that we could have, and I wanted to stay very surface level, so we're not doing time tracking in here yet, and nor should we have to be obligated to in that sense. I think it's a good tool in the sense that you can use it at a surface level, or you can dig in deep. You dig in too deep at times, and it gets to be you're spending more time dealing with the tool than doing the work, and that's not the goal at all, right?
So will this, after, let's say, will there be another one? So if Miguel goes, hey, Miguel, Brandon, our IT guy goes, hey, I need to go hook up the library,
We could very well track all of that in here. So like in this instance, going out here to the projects tab, we're only tracking right in this instance right here just Silverstone 1. But at some point in the very near future, because Tiff was gracious enough to give me the entire LID1 address list, saved me a boatload of time, so thank you. And then I relearned how to batch update and drop them all in and map everything in one fell swoop. So this is kind of representative of a chunk rather than the whole thing. But in the future, the new builds, the instances of like hooking up our own facilities, if we're going to take fiber to a new facility like the library does not have today, and Brandon says, what we need is we're going to get prepped ahead of time and get that infrastructure in, it's all mapped here. That the library install would be its own tile, and it would be alongside of these. Okay. But what this offers us in a couple different instances is, and it's hard to represent here, and it's probably easier to represent in the sandbox of where in green here in the test bed, it's like the LID has a color, the new build residential has its own color. Existing buildings that want to have their own color, new businesses have their own color, and that is the same implementation in the new one. Just there's nothing representative in what I could capture between yesterday and today.
Right. Yeah.
So it will catch it, and they will all be side by side, so you can prioritize and go, okay, well the library needs to have it by the end of the week for whatever reason.
Right.
You can do that in here.
No, actually, Brandon brought up a good point this morning to Tiff and I don't know if Paul's not, but if we could get that, obviously hooked up. Obviously, they get E-rate, obviously from the state of Idaho, so they get free internet, but that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get them hooked up to the city's system, so then it saves them $1,000 a month on their backup system, and that's tax dollars, not, you know what I mean?
It does, and there's 2.5 years roughly of that contract existing, but there have been instances where that system might go down.
Correct.
But comparatively, Brandon's run the test with Shasta. It is our fiber is head and shoulders faster,
right,
than their implementation currently. So bandwidth wise, speed wise, we're in really good shape at it. And Shasta was shocked at how low that cost is. And so even if we were to lose the grant that helps pay us that, I think it's like a 60-40 split or a 70-30 split, I forget, between Fed and state to cover the cost of that. If we have to pay $8.99 a month for fiber internet at the library,
saves you $1,000 on the backup system,
right?
And then your server, then your the servers that she has to buy currently,
right?
Which are what, 10 grand,
16, I think, in total with that and all the.
So there's a huge cost savings for tax dollars.
Yeah, I mean there's a big chunk of savings there that helps their budget out for sure.
And I know Miguel's going to probably use it for Carl Miller Park for free Wi-Fi for the citizens at Carl Miller events.
Yeah, so this implementation of Jira was really intended for just tracking what the field team and CSR's tasks are at the end of the day, and then how we choose to use it down the road. I mean, like I said, it's very malleable. You can add attachments in here if we weren't capturing something that needed to be captured. You could do attachments in here. You could do time logging in here. But again, like why have the team do it in two places, right? Like if they're time tracking for a time card already, why have them time track in here? Especially when this has on the summary page here is a perfect example of like earlier today, I called Kyle and Danny and we're like, hey, if you have anything to shift, log in and shift it real quick, and you know, so I can show that even after getting these in, you know, and updated, Kyle and Danny can immediately go to work and go, okay, well basically now we can abandon this Word doc and go to this is the idea of like their current scope of work. So in that sense, I think those guys will be really happy with it. It gives us a very nice at a glance, and then you can go in here and do. Again, we're kind of light on data in here at the moment, but you can run reports on different statuses and that kind of thing. This is very reflective of that first page because there's only that 123 addresses in there right now. But this will give you breakdowns of what's where, and it'll be a lot more representative of LID and non-LID side by side. So there's no question of like, here's how many new build residential commercials we have versus here's how many in the LID and where our balance of work is. So the reporting aspect of that I think will be very nice to have.
Mayor.
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Let me
Sorry,
review this really quickly. Let me spend the Robert's
Thank
Rules
you.
of
That
Order.
was my request.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I keep forgetting. Sorry.
No,
Yep.
you're good.
Yep.
Thank you.
All good. Go ahead.
Okay. What timeline are we looking at for LID 1 to close out? And I want to make this clear too. There's two separate entities, right? So we have LID 1.
There's three.
Oh my gosh, what's the third one?
The
So we have. Okay, well, good thing we have these workshops. All right, so we have LID 1,
Mm-hmm.
Fiber, which is New Connects.
Mm-hmm. In the city itself.
Okay. So this is very important to me. Well, I'll get into that in a second, why this is very important to me, and Paul answered my question now, and I'll read that out loud to everybody. But when is LID 1 looking to close out?
A lot of that's going to fall to how quickly the rest of this LID occurs, and this kind of tool is the thing that captures the timeline just by the nature of this tool. Once these tiles start moving, it will just by the nature of how it's designed will start capturing here's the average time for this type of neighborhood kind of thing. Like this is all very like straight runs, whereas like some other neighborhoods have like a lot more challenge physically. But I don't want to speak for the department or staff on what that timeline looks like, but this will give us at least the historics of here's how long it took us to achieve the thing.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify. One being it took us, what was it, close to 8 months for Stormy Mountain, where the first part of the Silverstone, they're crushing it. They've done more, I think, in the first February to the end of this March than they did, in 2 months of Stormy Mountain. That's for sure. So, I'll have to really, and that's what I love about the program. It's going to kind of quantifiably tell us, hey, Lago and whatever the other street was a February, and then the next street was, God, what was it?
It was so there's like Lago, Panner, Portal, and Shaft are the ones that are like currently.
So they did Lago and
Like-
Shaft
Mhm.
in the month, and then it was the next one, and the next one they did in March. So
Yeah, and then
they're cruising.
I should also add that I'm going to create an account that's like for council to be able to just like go in and look, kind of thing. So it'll be usable by the people on the ground, but those of us who need like read-only view, at some point this gets handed over and I'm not involved and I'll just be here like as the phone a friend, when it's up and running kind of thing. But like I shouldn't be steering the ship when it comes to any of this, right? Like this is implementing and then handing off.
Well, this goes to
is the
my other
prep.
concerns great guy to be doing this, but he shouldn't be doing this, right? This should be its own department with its own department head, its own budget, all that. So is that something that we can look at this summer and get that implemented where it's not, is that something that be its own department or would it be follow any public works or like I guess that's just up for discussion?
Yeah, so Councilman Harjo and I had that conversation. Eventually, it's going to go under Public Works. They all cross, somewhere along lines, and it's a utility, right? Just like water and wastewater, same enterprise, same all that good stuff eventually. So yes, it'll eventually get handed over. We didn't want to dump all that on the Cats or Danny. Here you go hither and do good work. We wanted to have Tiff, Paula, Chris, myself, all of us helping, to kind of steer it. Now that we've got Scott on board, Councilman Harjo on board, he's found probably the best way to keep everything in focus and in check, Because you got to remember, I've got 10 other departments that I'm running. I can't focus.
No, you shouldn't be.
Correct. So yes, it'll eventually get turned over to the Public Works Director when he feels more comfortable with it as well. Probably sooner rather than later. And that way I can focus my time equally on all the other departments as well.
And that also goes with the summer we were talking about, for accounting purposes, breaking them up between the different entities, which would be better for us to understand on the bill roll there.
And really quick on that, we
yeah.
did talk to Josh our auditor. So for this, when we do the budget this year, we will break it into. I mean, it'll be fiber, but you'll have LID, you'll have new connects, and you'll have the fiber. It'll all be the same department, but it'll be in kind of a two different, like you wanted, right?
Chunks.
Chunks,
Yeah.
yes, thank you.
That'd be good. So I had. What are we looking at for numbers for LID 2? Does that look like it's going to be a go? Do you have enough numbers?
Oh gosh, yeah. That's the problem. We try to tell everybody, you got to be patient. We have people in LID one go, finally, it's taken a while. I think, and this is me admitting that a mistake was made, that we bit off more than we can chew. We were worried in the beginning, since we were the second city to be adjudicated in the state of Idaho, that maybe the judge will only allow us one LID, and then we'd have to go back for a second. Well, now we see all the other cities, they don't even do judicial confirmations anymore. Mm-hmm. They just go out and do it. So it's already been adjudicated twice, and so 700 homes is a large chunk to really bite off, especially when you're starting a brand new department. You've got brand new people that you're trying to train, and then try to get people on board. Did we make a large bite of the apple? We took a large bite of the apple. We should have did 300 homes, and then you have the 50% or 55% take rate. You know what I mean?
So the number there, what was it, like 300 something thousand? Was it 330 for LID 1 or 396? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any of that left over, is that how it works then? That will go to LID 2? Like it will just transfer over?
So what you'll do is you'll whatever the total, let's just say it's $1 million, and then you divide that by the rest. Yes, eventually, if you have money left over, it would get transferred. But you got to remember, all the people that took it is going to pay all that back. So you're going to have all that chunk back into. So you'll have more money than.
So when they pay it back, do they pay it? There's two options to pay back, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it's either they can pay out everything up front, whatever that number is, we still don't know, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Or they can pay it over so many years.
15 years.
Build it in 15 years.
Yeah,
okay.
amortize, yeah.
What if the majority of people are like, I'm going to do the 15-year plan, and we don't get that chunk of money we need to get it?
So we go out for the bond. We have our bond counsel go out and get us a bond, and we're already going to get the money back regardless when that bond goes out.
So there's a level of guarantee that when the homeowners that decide to amortize enter into that they've already entered into the contract to receive fiber. If they choose to amortize versus paying the one chunk up front, if they amortize over that time, there's a surety that exists that allows us to go out for the city bond that says this was our expenditure for that. Keep me in between the lanes here, Paula, and you guys have more experience on this. I'm just at a very surface level, that gives us the ability to say we know we have this money coming in. We go out for the bond, that gives us that chunk of money, and then we have all of that money coming in from the amortized funds to repay that bond, correct?
Yeah, so when they make their payment, I think we only pay it once a year, right? So we'll get all these payments every month, and then the bond, whoever it is, say, okay, we want our payment, and we go in there, we write the check, boom.
So we're paying back the bond.
Mm-hmm.
The customers are paying back the bond. The bond's paying back the city.
Okay. And then the last thing I just have, I get these questions all the time, and I just, on a public platform here, want to clarify or hopefully answer. So this was a question I asked Paula yesterday, and then she answered it quickly, thank you. But this is more for clarification. I said, I'm going to ask and confirm that anyone who did not opt in for fiber is not paying for fiber. This goes for both LID1 and new connects. This is important for me to address, as many citizens are concerned that they will be paying into fiber. If not now, they will be in the future for O&M. Okay, so maybe if you could provide an example of what opt-in citizens are paying to the city to assure we are building a fund for this type of service department. And then that was my question. I said, I think around $17 or something. So then Paula says, I have attached both the customer sign-up sheet and the fiber contract agreement. If you are a new utility customer, you are required to complete the application for city utilities. This will trigger us to bill for water, wastewater, and sanitation. The staff is asking if you are requesting to be connected to fiber utility, if it is available at your location. After verifying with the fiber staff that everything is good to go at that location, we will begin the billing cycle. If you are in the LID and the fiber installation has been completed, the fiber staff will notify us to begin billing at that location. The City Hall staff will verify with the customer that they are connected, and we will start billing the O&M. With that said, opt-in accounts are not billed. It is only connected accounts that have been completed that will receive a monthly bill. The monthly amount is $17.50 set by resolution. So that $17.50 is building up a pot of money. So for operation maintenance, if something breaks down, someone has to go out there. That's what's going to pay that wage for that city employee to go out. Okay, because it's just like... So we all use the roads, we all use water and wastewater, but we're not all using fiber, right? So that's where it's just really important to know that as tax-paying citizens, we're paying into what we're paying into and what we're not paying into for this kind of hybrid thing, right? It's, you see what I'm saying?
So everybody pay, let's just say anybody that owns a home or owns property inside city limits pays for the roads, absolutely.
Yes, right.
Now, if I don't want water and wastewater at my house, which I do, I don't have to pay for that either. We have people that don't pay their bill, and we go out, shut them off, and and not like we want to, but that's, you got to pay to play, and that's quintessentially the broadband stuff. You got to pay to play. If you want it, great. If you don't, good.
So it's just a clarification that we will not, as me, I'm not a non-opt-in, right? Will
Right.
not be paying into this in the future for any type of O&M. Okay.
Right. Yep, only who you can. It's only through resolution. And so only the people that signed up have to pay.
And
And
there's
if you don't pay, they'll go and shut you off. Just like water and wastewater.
Paula, help me if I'm off base here, but we have a new connect line in the budget that captures every time we have a building come in that reaches the point of, is it building permit? That triggers a number of things, but in a very elementary sense, if that person opts in that has the home associated with that building permit and they opt in, we collect that $11.95 through that process. They come in and say, okay, we want to get signed up. The fiber team and Megan, when they're like actually doing the work of pulling the fiber and setting up the VBG and all that stuff, they help them get set up in the ISP choosing part of that. Like they range from what is like $7.99 to $5.99 to $24.99, and they choose which level of thing they want, which carrier that they want, and that gets billed. And then the $17.50, a separate charge from that, is what we collect in maintenance and operations. And then that, like you said, that pool of money just continues to build month after month after month. For the past couple months, the new builds that have come online that have chosen, that where those residents have chosen to do some of this, our neighbors at Standard Plumbing, while that's not a new build, it's technically a new build, and they wanted the service, so they paid their commercial rate plus whatever the footage was. So the original resolution, off the top of my head, provides that, like, if you're not a new build and you want fiber, you paid a certain amount plus a dollar amount per foot after the first 100 feet. So if you have fiber here and a place a block over wants it, every foot past the first 100 feet, they pay a certain rate for that, like, actual cost of install, plus the hard materials of what that costs in terms of equipment and, like, boxes, the VBG, all of those things are, like, itemized on their invoice kind of thing. So it's,
And I think you mentioned to me, I asked Councilman Hardill this question yesterday. He gave a good example, I think. So, like, let's say you own your home, you're gonna be out of the area for the next year, doing whatever, TDY or something, whatever. You could shut down the box or whatever.
the ISP.
ISP. But the $17.50 would still be accruing monthly for however long you're gone.
Is that,
You could shut that down too, because it's like, wouldn't it be?
if it's,
No?
We'd have to pull it, just like you'd have to pull the water lines or wastewater lines. They're still gonna have to pay the $17.50.
But I thought if I choose, like, let's say I bought a home,
You can shut off your ISP.
but I can't shut off my own M.
Would you shut off your own into your water? You could disconnect all your services.
Correct.
If you disconnected all your
That's what I was-
services and
that's
nothing was
what-
up and running,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
wouldn't have to pay it.
Right.
So if you're like, hey, I want to disconnect my services, not necessarily a final bill, but when you return from your TDY or PCS, then you
Right.
can say, I want to reconnect my services. Well, you haven't been billed at all. We haven't touched anything over there. You winterize your house, and so we just turn everything back on, which would be the same with the fiber. So we've disconnected it, and now we would just go back in, and it's a plug and play. You would just plug it back in and reconnect
there's-
it.
there's
So
a
you wouldn't
fee.
be paying the $17.50 while you were gone.
and the same would go in the instance of, I opt in, I have it, I paid up front, I'm paying my ISP, I'm paying my M&O, and I decide to sell my house. I move out of that house and I shut my utilities down, and that account does not exist any longer, and there's no service being provided that's any aspect of utility to that home. Somebody else comes along and buys that and say, okay, I want water, wastewater. Oh, I can have fiber, and then they start an account new. They're not on the hook then to pay the
additional hookup fee or anything.
any additional
None of
hookup fee in that sense. They start at the ISP and the M&O, and then that's just their bill.
Or they could say, I don't want the fiber, and so we don't plug it back in.
And you just don't opt in for that, and which could happen, right? The new person buying a house then says, I don't want fiber, I'm going to obviously take water and wastewater, and they don't get fiber, they don't pay.
But if that prior owner had the plan where it was built in for 15 years, they would be paying, the new owner would be paying into that.
No, at closing,
At,
Yeah.
at the time that the home is sold, that's where the connection to get to, like, title search and that kind of
Yeah.
thing is going to occur if it's amortized. And say I opted in, it was installed, I decided to amortize, and in 2 years I go down the road and say, okay, I got to move, I'm gonna sell my home. At the time that the home sells and title closes, that gets paid off in that moment, and
Got it.
there's no
Carryover.
individual, like, carryover to the new owner. It's just is a thing that travels with the home itself. The possibility of service travels with the home, but no financial obligation travels to the new owner, if that makes sense.
Councilwoman Garvey's on the phone. We forget about her.
there was
Is she there?
a homeowner in
I'm
Morning View.
listening.
Okay.
In Morning View, literally had a home that wasn't connected to the cities. This is just a quick story. And he goes, well, I wanted the fiber, so I sold my home here and bought another one where it was.
Oh.
So that was kind of funny. Sorry, Councilwoman. This opens.
I'm fine. I
Okay.
would have interjected if I had a question. I'm just listening.
All right. Sorry, Scott.
So
Thank you.
we'll jump back on the presentation side of this for the PowerPoint. Actually, I'm going to jump out of this for a second because I mentioned that I'd show what the phone app looks like. I literally recorded this like 5 minutes ago. So this was like a screen grab of me scrolling through what Kyle and Danny would be using for that, entering into like the project of Silverstone, flipping through the separate columns, and showing both the web app and the phone app have this cool trick where I think I'll show it in here in just a second. You can filter down. This thing uses like essentially the equivalent of like hashtags on social media, but you can go in here. I've put tags in like by street name and by subdivision, so I can go type in Minor in the filter and it'll bring up only the houses on Minor. I can type in, Lago, and it's bringing only the houses on Lago and those statuses. So it looks like a big heavy chunk when you're looking at it from this board or list view. The list view, especially, like as you scroll through here, it's like that seems kind of daunting. But if you want to filter down to a particular aspect of something that you want to look at, so on the screen here you can show I want to show only what's on Panner Street, and it will show you only the Panner addresses rather than having to sort through everything. So as the teams work through street work and work through billing, you can filter it down to logical chunks in like a click or two kind of thing. So I wanted to make sure, I know Kyle and Danny aren't here, and they've seen this, they've tinkered with it on their phones as of today. When Megan's back, we'll go through that with her as well. But I wanted to make sure that you guys had a look at that, so you can see it on the move if you need to. So after discussing the PM tool, I talked with the fiber team about things that might make sense. Some of this is me asking questions about, okay, how are we doing some stuff? Other things come from a logical sense of, right now we have like a paper application for new utilities, making modification or an addendum to that travels with it that says, okay, we capture water, wastewater, and solid waste currently, adding a fiber opt-in to that document. Should we not? How does that process work? Like, those are kind of future discussions, but we kind of touched on that in a couple different like internal conversations. One of the things that I picked up on that Kyle and Danny had mentioned in yesterday's kickoff meeting was I'd asked the question about, do we need to put a column in for like that like revisit to the home for like diagnosis and that kind of thing, and Kyle and Danny mentioned that they have kind of like a cheat sheet of notes that help them diagnose either on site or remotely. If your VBG is blinking like this, that's on the router side or the ISP side. If it's blinking in this other way, that might indicate that it's an internal thing for us to look at. And I asked, would it make sense to have like a cut card that we can give to the customer after we've like hooked them up and everything's inside? We can go, okay, here's your little quick troubleshooting guide. If the VBG looks like this right here, call us. If it looks like that right there, call the ISP, and here's where you find that contact info for us or or the ISP or what have you. So again, not me prescribing. It just seems like kind of a logical discussion to have is how we hone what the customer facing side is. And that's one of them that we could do. Jira scheduling and assignments internally to that tool, as I kind of mentioned, like there's deeper drilling of like task management and time tracking and that kind of stuff. The idea is never to make this an anchor or a parachute for somebody to have to drag around. It's what tool does that software offer us that we could use and makes our processes better, faster, easier, kind of thing. So at a future date, once we have more addresses in there and the teams are up and running and regularly using it, maybe we have that discussion internally to go, staff, what do you think? Like, it does these other things. Do you think you'd use it? Does management want to have a certain view into things or capture something there that isn't being actively tracked? Like that could happen. One of the things that I will be doing as a part of this is creating kind of like the operating handbook for us on how to do this, and include like some short videos of, I know how to batch enter from a CSV file and how to map the things. Say I'm out of here in a few years and Megan has moved on and she was the one who would be doing it in that time period. How does she transfer that knowledge and information to the next person who sits in that chair and has that responsibility? So I want to make sure that we capture that in parallel to all this, is like, how do you bolster what the knowledge is going forward, and it's something that can be referenced back to later and go like, oh hey, here's a how-to video, click, and then be able to pause it and follow the steps, kind of thing. New utility customer handout, like I just mentioned, the new utility application is a paper thing right now, and I think it's also, there's a portal on OpenGov that we use currently. What staff might think is an appropriate step, or is it outside of the realm of that, to add the appropriate steps to notify, hey, your home, say I buy a home that has fiber in it already, or I'm a new build customer, your home is enabled to do this. Would you like to take this thing? Right now, forgive me if I'm wrong, it's primarily a question asked from customer service to the new utility customer, right? We have a number of ways to sign up, obviously. Like if somebody chooses to go to mountainhomefiber.com and sign up independently, but if somebody buys a new home and they walk in the front door and they say, hey, I need to sign up for water and wastewater. Right now, our application doesn't mention a thing about fiber. Should we update that? I think logically it's a good discussion to have. Whether executive leadership decides that's the thing to do or how that looks, I'm happy to help where necessary, but that's something to consider. Also, it kind of acts as a marketing tool, right? Like if we don't have customer facing things, somebody's new to the community and doesn't know the backstory of, oh hey, this community is fiber enabled, it does give them something to go, oh hey, maybe that does look good, and then they can explore that from there, whether they commit that day or not, right? And then another topic about stock on hand tracking. We've seen on the bill runs, Kyle and Danny and staff in-house are doing a really good job of separating out like LID1 specific things versus new builds. So for instance, on a recent bill run, there was 2 orders of VBGs and they're tracked separately in the accounting. Promoting that same mentality, how are we managing the stock on hand of those things and how to forecast for the needs. Again, back to JIRA, and probably even more so to OpenGov, which is why I'd love to work with Brandon to build an automatic trigger in there, that you can start to forecast what the needs are for new builds. Right now, we can kind of like look at the sheet and go, okay, well, here's how many building permits we anticipate coming down the pipe realistically, and we could order based on that, or we can track stock and have a pretty fair view of what needs to be done and when, in terms of ordering for those kind of things, that we didn't just buy everything up front and have like a bunch of like new build VBGs sitting on hand, and we didn't buy 1,000 just for that and just sitting on them, right? It doesn't make sense financially. But to be able to monitor and foresee what's coming, and then at a glance again be able to go, maybe we need to look at ordering X, Y, or Z parts. You know, we're getting a little low on this. They're, you know, the first order might have been, you know, tens of weeks out. We had that brief discussion with Kyle and Danny. You know, some of the parts and pieces in the early days took like 30 weeks to deliver.
Sorry to cut you off there, Councilman. And that was the lessons learned too with that first Stormy Mountain purchase. Like, we purchased every box, every conduit, every what was it? I mean, we ordered all that up front, which they were telling us, oh, it's 30 weeks out. We're like, oh my gosh, we'll never get this done, la da da da. So lesson learned now that everything's more attainable. We started that at the end of COVID, supply chain issue.
Right.
So there's a lot of lessons learned in Stormy Mountain.
Sure.
I'd say.
Sure. Yeah, so that's the essentials on that. Before we jump into other stuff, is there any questions, stuff from staff that you know, needs to be mentioned? Anything? Okay. And then potential topics in future workshops. You know, I think as Councilwoman Workload mentioned, you know, establishing the department, appropriate timing for that. Taking another look at, you know, what does equipment and workforce look like to be able to deliver on a timeline. That's always that balance of, well, we can achieve it faster, but you need to spend more money to achieve those things, which means you'd have to buy more equipment and hire more headcount, or you pace it out and save the money and don't buy that equipment and don't hire more, but understand that your throughput is limited to that throughput. So that really falls to leadership, you know, to decide. That's not necessarily I think a council discussion. I think it's when those items are identified by staff and then brought to council in budgeting season and that kind of stuff, or equipment purchases. That would be the logical and appropriate throughput of that information. Creating firm policies for future LIDs. Councilman Brennan and I had a brief discussion about this in the past of, we have the open LID one now. If somebody, say, in Stormy Mountain or War Eagle decided, hey, I didn't opt in, but the LID's still open, what's our policy on going back to do that work? It is still open. It's an undertaking to drag the equipment up there and do one, but where our policy sits on that today is like not firmly adopted, I feel like.
Right.
So that one could be a pretty solid discussion. Not to say that needs to, or any of this needs to fall to like independent workshops like this much longer. Like they're certainly helpful, but at the same time, like, these are smaller chunks that we could probably talk about and discuss during standard council meetings, rather than allocating specific time for them. adopting and documenting design and implementation standards, right? So as we talked about with Kyle and Danny, like the BRE network design is different than how we decided to implement it, because theirs was a very BRE's implementation was a very idealistic drawing, and didn't take into account certain aspects of, of neighborhood geology, that kind of thing. So now, as we've got more experience, maybe there's that discussion to be had on, okay, here's really how we need to implement these things. This is the best practice for here. If we decide to double head count at some point, training up on that and showing the documented, here's how you do it, might be a nice to have for internal to that department. Again, that's not for council to steer per se. It's merely a suggestion of, as things move forward, as we, have the revolving door of employment, Kyle and Danny decide to, to move back to be with family or something. So we're not losing knowledge and experience, that we can stand on that gained knowledge and have a leg up, so folks don't continue to learn on the job. These guys have acquired a lot of good information and practical knowledge. I want to make sure that we preserve that at some point. And again, I can't be the one to do that per se, but it would be, from the operation of the city, it saves us money in the long run to have a good knowledge base to work from. LID1 closing requirements. Paula, you and I had a discussion about this one point. Tiffany and I had a discussion about it. The what happens as we near closer to LID1 closing. What that looks like and the triggers to start other things, like contacting the folks who took and are hooked up. Does that include assessment letters? Do we, like, our requirements for recording that with the assessor's office, differentiating a list of who was amortized, who paid up front, and that kind of thing? Like, there's stuff ahead in that sense that I think we're going to have a lot of questions on as council. We're going to get a lot of questions on, so having that discussion ahead of time internally to go, this is the idea, this is the plan, here's how this works, and be able to have kind of that, like, unified, where we all know what's coming, we all know the process, so when those questions do come, we can answer those. And I think really that's it for my stuff. I know there were some other questions that you had, Jenny.
I just have one more hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if a homeowner who opted in for fiber and sells their house, let's say May, June, this summer, whatever, and the city still does not know how much it will cost, what will that person be charged?
Go ahead, Tiff.
So, if the current owner opted in, let's say, and then they sell their home, that's your hypothetical.
Mm-hmm. Before
If the new owner right now, like the title company, because they're living within an LID district, the title company is called. The instance that has occurred is the new owner wanted to take on the responsibility. So I just sent over the contract and they opted in. If they don't want to, then ultimately we would pull back. They would have all the equipment. We would pull back out of the home. So the VBG, like if they were hooked up, the VBG and the conduit would stay, the lines would come out, if that makes sense.
So the
And
little
it just
modem
be
box will
rolled
come
So
out.
the future ability still exists that the conduit is there, but all the infrastructure that provides the actual service.
Well, quintessentially, we take the VBG out, we leave the fiber optic cable there, and we just go and plug it at the fiber hut to make it simple. It's plug and play. And there's no, you don't have to, if let's say my house is hooked up right now, and it's like, I don't want it either now, and I already have it ran there, everything. Yeah, there's no obligation for me to pay, and I sold my house.
It is one less home than that was willing to pay that will not be paying at time of closure.
Yeah.
And then potentially, if you have so many of those, it would increase the amount on the other
Yeah.
ones that
Yeah,
opt in.
Yes.
If
it's
a
all-
significant enough of those instances happened, it could affect that total, that total rate at the end. But so far there's been one. So hopefully that stays the fringe case. But
The city of Ammon, sorry, Mayor.
You're good. Just open.
The city of Ammon had very few of those in their mini LIDs they did. They only had, I think Bruce Patterson said a handful.
How many LEDs did they have?
I think they did 8 in total.
So far.
So far.
Yeah. So,
gotcha.
Okay, that's all I had. I asked all my other stuff earlier.
Yeah, I think that's all I have. Unless Chris, do you have any questions, concerns? That'd be okay.
Okay.
I think we're good.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, no worries.
Councilwoman Garvey, are you going to be able to make 5 o'clock, or am I zooming?
It's just the two of us here, so I'm gonna fix both, so I'll,
Brendan will be here.
Who's driving back?
yeah, I'm just gonna zoom in because I don't know if he gets here at like 5 or 4:50, I'll just,
Okay.
the bill's pulling in, so I'm just gonna zoom in.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, okay.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Stretch my legs. My watch told me to stand like 3 times.
Yeah, I know that thing. Like, I love this watch, but when it starts getting like, "Hey,
I
stand
broke my
up!"
flip-flop.
Oh no!
I know, my fifth
You're
sandal.
gonna flat tire.
Now I'm gonna go to Amazon and buy a new pair. Oh, I heard it. I heard it popping there. That's messing with me.
Oh, that's
I
funny.
didn't tell Paula I broke my sandal.
I will tell you this. I've already, you mentioned